Well, this is going to be a really fun episode on the Redeem Her Time podcast. You guys know I love bringing on amazing women who are also kingdom women who are making a difference through the business that God has called them to. And so today I've invited Sabrina to come and join us. We have such a fun story about how God keeps bringing our paths across each other. But Sabrina Hammonds, I'm going to let you just tell us a little bit about yourself before we dive into what you do business wise. I just want to hear, what are you juggling in this season of life right now? What are some of the things outside of the work you do that are getting your time and attention?
So I'm excited to be here, Lissa. Thank you for having me on. I'm a wife, almost 13 years now. My husband and I have been married. I have four kiddos, so two are out of the house. We have all ages and stages, 25, 19, almost 10, and 6.
Wow.
And I homeschool our two younger ones. And so I feel like it's always an adventure, and especially working from home and homeschooling, this is year 2 for us. So when you talk about time, I feel like you're speaking my language.
Right? Yeah. We all get 24 hours in a day. We talk about this all the time. And
Yes.
it's the number one equalizer. And yet it's the number one differentiator because we approach it differently. And the decisions we make with it could lead us in very different directions. And what I love to say is it's never too late to start shifting how you approach time and making different decisions around it. So I love
Yeah,
how you're giving time to these things that matter because as you know from your first two, they're not going to stay in your house forever. And so this time
that's right.
with them is so precious. And so I love that you're doing
Yeah.
and you have flexibility with your work. So tell us a little bit about the work you do. What is it that God has called you to do in the kingdom?
So I geek out on the stories and testimonies of other people.
Hmm.
And so God led me to start a business where I get to champion those messages. I get to serve transformational leaders who have a message that they're called to shift the culture. So it's really more than just their business, it's more than just the message of their book, it's transformation.
Hmm.
It's what God has done in and through them. And he's called them to share that message to shift the culture. And we get to do that primarily through podcasts, but also those kingdom collaborations, those strategic connections, and various media outlets.
Wow. And here's what I love. So often we have this vision, right, in our hearts. We maybe have a tangible something that we've written or created or that we've put together. And yet the world is really noisy out there. There are a lot
Yeah.
of voices, let's be honest, especially in certain arenas that are out there, trying to grab our attention. And so as a business owner, here is this struggle
Yes.
around where do I invest my time so that, we always bring everything down to time here on the Redeem Her Time podcast so that
Hmm.
I'm being wise with my time, not unwise, like we go back to Ephesians 5, and so that I'm leveraging my time and seeing a good ROI on it. So let's
Yeah.
talk a little bit about why kind of maybe the problem behind this that we're running into, especially as you are working with so many, people who have this mission, who have this message
Yeah.
that we only have so much time in a day and all these channels are really noisy out there. So how does that affect us as we're trying to get our message out there?
Yeah. So it seems that there comes a point in the entrepreneurial journey where you feel like you reach this plateau almost in sharing your message. Like I've plateaued in my reach and I don't understand how to break past that ceiling. And why does it feel like my marketing efforts aren't like I'm not seeing this great return, but yet I'm doing all the things, quote unquote, that's probably showing up on social media on all the places because I feel like that's what the world tells us to do. So you're showing up in all the places, you're emailing your people, you're everywhere, but then you're wondering, are they even hearing me? Am I reaching my people? Because I'm not seeing that exponential growth. And I know that God has called me to reach so many people. And I know there's more, but it's almost like you're standing on the cusp or the edge of something, and I don't know how to access the more. So I feel
Mm.
like that's where they're at. And if you're in business for 3 to 5 years, then you're doing the thing very consistently. You're solid in your message. So it's not your messaging. It's, I feel like you're spread too thin and
Okay.
you need to level up in the strategy, the outreach strategy that you're using. So it's not that you need to be everywhere, but you need to be in specific places where your people are listening. And so that's why podcast guesting is so powerful, and not just guesting, but I believe guesting in the kingdom is different because the world tells you that guesting is just numbers. But in the kingdom, we know that people and relationships are key. And so you're not just looking for the podcast with the greatest numbers, but you're looking for your people. Where are my people listening? Where are the hosts that are passionate about some of the same things I'm passionate about? And not only how can I get my message out on their podcast, it's about how can I serve them? How can I serve them and their audience? And that's what we're doing here today because we're going to serve one another's audience, right? Because I'm here speaking to your audience and then you're going to come and speak to mine. And I don't feel like we would be doing that if I didn't know more about you as a person. And we had connected previously and we've had conversations and I've looked into what you do and I'm like, she really has a heart for Christian women to
Mm.
build their business. Like you understand that building a business in the kingdom is different,
Yeah.
you know? And so I feel like those similar passions is what makes us a good fit, right? Because we're here to advance the kingdom with the things that God has given us to share. And so I
Yeah.
think that gives a picture of the problem, but then how we can begin to move into the solution. It's
Yeah.
through aligned connections and podcast guesting, which can lead to so many other things, so many collaborations.
Hmm. And I love that, like you pointed out, we are right now fleshing out exactly what you were teaching us
Yes,
to do. So you
yes,
guys take notice of this. In fact, this is how this very specific collaboration came into being. Sabrina and I have connected in the past. We've been on each other's podcasts in the past.
yep,
Recently, I heard Sabrina on another friend of mine's podcast, was really just impacted by what she was sharing, reached out to her and said, "Hey, I just heard you. I think it's time for me to bring you back on. Would you be open to doing a swap?" Right. So I love how like,
yeah,
God works and we follow those Holy Spirit nudges and there are win-wins that we can be looking for. But I want to go back to a couple things before we go on to the solution part, right? And that is where you talked about how the world often tells us to be in all the places.
that's
And
right.
what I heard you say, and I loved how you worded this, it spreads us too thin.
Yeah,
And then I wonder, like, am I really even present? Even though I think I have a presence on all these platforms, but I am not even present to know if anybody even noticed my quote unquote presence. And so what was the point, right,
yeah,
of doing all of
yeah.
it? So are you a proponent of like really narrowing down and simplifying to picking like one or two main places so that you're not spreading yourself so thin?
I absolutely am because I've been, so for the past few years, for the most part in the beginning, I have been on Facebook, I've been on Instagram, I got over on LinkedIn. I thought about doing Clubhouse. Gosh, I'm trying to think, okay, where are the other places? I looked into Mighty Networks. So now I'm at 5.
Mm-hmm.
Plus I'm within those places, like within Facebook, there's groups. So I mean, I could start using my toes here to tell you like
Right?
all the places that I was in. But it's really been in the last probably 2 years, this year, so loudly and clearly. I feel like the Lord was saying, you've got to eliminate the distractions. There's no room for distractions. And he said Instagram is no longer necessary. And so I am on Facebook and LinkedIn only.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not in all of the groups anymore. I don't participate in all of the events because that very reason that you were just talking about, that am I really anywhere? Because I was trying to be everywhere because I thought that's what I'm supposed to do. I'm building a business, so I have to show up everywhere. But it was just feeling like noise. if
Mm.
I'm being honest. It just felt very noisy.
Yeah.
And I just felt like I was going through the motions.
Checking boxes, I call it, right? Check the
I
box.
know.
I showed up there. Check the box. I showed up here.
You
And
know
this is
about that.
where
Yeah.
I know I checked boxes for so long because I am that girl. If you are an expert or you look like you know what you're talking about and you tell me this is what I should do, guess what? It gets added to my list. And I will do it and do it and do it and do it, even if there's aren't any results. And I finally, the Lord was like, Lissa,
Yeah.
would you please look at the ROI on these boxes that you're checking? Would you please look and see, is
Yeah.
there fruit in this? Because it's not going to serve you in your business or the people out there if our message is diluted, if we're diluted, if we're spread over in all these places. So I love that you're giving us permission to do less and to not
That's
be
right.
everywhere. The other thing I
Yeah.
heard you say, which I thought was really interesting, I want to dive into this a little bit. You talked about the fact that sometimes in business, we grow, and then we reach this plateau. And I think
Yeah.
so many of us have done this, right? Because we start something, whether it's a brand new business or we're launching something new, and we kind of work through our friends and family and like those people closest to us. And then we kind of like get to this like, now who, what, now what, right? And you talked about
Yeah.
plateau and breaking through that ceiling. So why do you think it is that, that we hit that place? And then what do most business owners do once they kind of hit that ceiling? Do they just stay there? Do they, try to kind of get around it, and then maybe they're spreading themselves out, hoping that's the answer to getting around it? Like, I just would love to dive more into that plateau and breaking that ceiling.
Yeah. So I think as we grow as business owners, our message gets more and more clear.
Mm.
But if we're still using the same method to reach our people, it's like casting the wide net. And so as we know with social media, there are algorithms and so you kind of have to trudge through that and figure out that. But when you become so crystal clear with your message, you're not necessarily questioning, do I know what God has called? No, I do know what God has called me to share. But why is it not reaching my people? So then you begin to ask yourself, well, maybe I need to read, maybe I need to, in order to reach more, I need to do more.
Mm.
I feel like that's the first place that we go. Maybe I'm not doing enough,
Yes.
right? Do
Yeah.
I need to go over here and be on this other platform? Do I need to be posting and engaging more?
Mm.
Because it's that doing, right? And especially for those of us who are high achievers, we end up adding more to our plate. But it's not the doing more, it's the narrowing in and focusing and perhaps even pivoting. Like
Mm.
maybe I don't need to be on 3 platforms and all of these groups, but instead, I need to reevaluate, where are my people actually? Where are they engaging the most? And where do I find that I'm engaging with them the most? So I'm not necessarily saying do away with social media altogether,
Mm.
but really see what's working and what is producing the most engagement and getting in those clients and stay there. But then when you add in the podcast guesting strategy, you're able to say, okay, this is my message and these are my people.
Mm.
Now let me see, where are they? So it's that very targeted. It's like I see the target in the arrow. I feel like that's the visual that God has given me with podcast guesting. It's taking the message, which is the arrow,
Mm.
and looking at the platforms that are out there and aiming for the target where your people are. So it's not trudging through the algorithms. It's not blasting the post everywhere hoping that it sticks. It's no, I'm going to find where they are listening and I'm going to go there.
Mm. Yeah, and there's something about being in someone's ears that I think gets into their head and into their heart. When we're
Yes.
scrolling, right, we make a
Yes.
little bit of that beautifully crafted, message that you created, but we just see the first couple of lines if we don't click on the more, because we see that crazy cat video that's right underneath it, and that's where we're going, right? And so it's
Yes.
interesting how as business owners we can put all this time into thinking this is going to be what's going to really touch her heart, and she doesn't even get to that part, and or the algorithm doesn't show it to her. So let's dive into podcast guesting and then also collaboration opportunities, because I truly believe, just like you, this is, I mean, talk about leveraging time, right?
Yeah.
Instead of an algorithm that decides what 1 to 3% of your people get to see your post, when I have your podcast in my library, 100% of the time that your new episode comes up, I can see it and I get to decide if I want to open it and listen. And for me, I put my earbud in and I listen when I'm driving, I'm walking, I'm
Hmm.
mopping the floors, I'm cleaning bathrooms, I'm putting away groceries. So I feel like it helps us kind of, the listener to multitask and not have to be right in front of a screen. So let's dive into some of what you teach around this and why you think this is so effective and how we can start really leveraging some of those types of things to be getting our message out.
Yeah, so I wanted to share a couple of things that I learned recently from the podcast statistics that I found some of them to be a little surprising. So when you think of, you mentioned about the scrolling thing, people are not really consuming, they're really just scrolling.
Mm.
But the interesting thing is that research has shown that 55% of listeners are going to podcasts because they are wanting to learn.
Mm.
I thought that was so interesting. They're specifically tuning in because they're wanting to learn. And so, even more than that, it said that 70, I think it was 77% of those listeners said that they were shifting the way that they made decisions based on the podcasts that they were listening to. So,
Wow.
they even said that it's more influential than social media. So,
Because you have
people,
longer to feel like you know, like, and trust someone and start
exactly.
shifting how you're thinking about whatever the topic is, right?
So I share that to say that if you're not even sure that this is a place where you're going to get a return on your investment of time, you really need to understand what is going on with the podcasting space. That people are intentionally showing up and listening to the things because they're wanting to improve their lives, they're wanting to make better decisions, and it's literally shifting the way that people live and the
Hmm.
decisions that they're making. So they're tuning in, and so if they're listening, that's where we need to be,
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I love this. I love this because we don't just want to be putting stuff out there just to put stuff out there, but because it's
right?
what they need and what's going to draw them in to take that next step to really see the transformation.
Right.
The beautiful thing too, as I'm thinking about this, is like you and I both have our own podcast as well, which is great, right? And we've worked out how we do that. But there are a lot of people who, they're like, I don't know if I could do that. But it feels like podcast guesting is kind of like that really easy entry point because all you have to do is show up with a microphone and
Absolutely.
be your voice out there without having to do all the tech pieces around it, right?
Yes. So I think it's a great entry point to get your message out there. Like maybe it's not the stage, right? You're not speaking in front of thousands and so it's not as intimidating, but I do feel like there's specific things that you need to have clarity on in order to be a guest on a podcast effectively. Now, anybody can be a guest, but you have those that would say, "Can I just speak on your podcast? I just want to share because I just love talking." Right? Like you're probably not going to reach your people that way because they're so broad and general. And again, there's podcasts out there for those people. They're just showing up and they're having casual conversation and somebody's listening. But if you want to utilize it for the purpose of growing your business and reaching your people, you need to first know what is your message. What has God called you to share? 3 to 5 topics is what I say you need to have in order to step out there. You need to know these are my 3 to 5 go to topics. I notice you have those in your one sheet. And it just makes it really easy for the host to say, hey, these are the things that she speaks on. And I think this one right here would be a good fit for my people. So, I mean, I appreciate that because I don't want to have to figure out and do all the deep dive research to say, oh, well, I think this would no, we don't want that. Right? We want to know what do you share and what's going to work for my audience. So knowing your message and of course your audience. Who are you called to speak to? Who resonates with your message, with your story, with who are those people that you're called to serve? And then the last, and I think the most overlooked is probably what's the purpose for being a guest anyway? Why do you want to show up and be a guest? Because that's going to determine how do you want people to connect with you at the end of the show,
Mhm.
because the host most often will be so gracious at the end and say, how can people find you? And that's a great opportunity for you to A, grow your email list. Or is it B, I just want to straight connect with clients. I want to get them on the phone so that I can share a little bit about the transformation that I bring. Is it simply to get your message out there? You just want to drive traffic to your website so people can find you and get to know you. So if you don't have a purpose or you don't know the purpose, you're not going to know where to send people to. So if it's the email list, you want to have a resource, right? If it's, I got to get people on the phone because I need to speak to them, well, you're going to offer like a free 30-minute consult or something. If it's just your website, well, then you're going to say, hey, they can find me on my website. So I think oftentimes people will just say, find me here, but there's no purpose behind it. So knowing your message, your audience, and your purpose are those foundational pieces. And then from there, it's really just knowing and having that confidence. Like, I do know my message, and just getting past I think, initial, like, what if I say like too many times? Or what if I say, you know? So I think once you have those pieces in place, you just got to put yourself out there.
Yeah. I love this, right? Because you're going to get better. Your message is
That's
going to be
right.
clearer. The way you present it is going to be more engaging
Yeah,
the more you practice. And so, yes,
that's right.
but I'm sure we could go back to both of us, in our early years of podcasting, whether it was as a host or as a guest, and be like, oh my goodness,
I
so
can't believe I
embarrassing.
kept saying that. Yes.
Right, right. And
Right?
yet, this is how we grow and this is how we learn. And what I love is like, I'm seeing how this can really open up some other opportunities. So it may start, behind a microphone on a screen with a host, but one day then they may be hosting a summit or they may be hosting an
Yeah.
in-person event with a stage or, something like that. And so now you've got this kind of like this proving ground, right? Of
Yes.
who you are and what you speak about and all of that. And now you can take all that and step into some of those bigger arenas. So let's talk a little bit about some of those the kingdom collaborations, and how connections can lead to, all kinds of opportunities as business owners to be working with others that have similar audiences or there's some kind of synergy in what we do.
Yeah, I think it really first starts with being willing to do the research and to look into these people that you're connecting with. Because if you just want to be on their platform to blast your message, then you're not really showing up and serving. But once you get to know them, then you're able to see what are the natural opportunities for collaborating. Like, you might be someone who serves people that are business owners and your focus is on time, but then you might have someone that their focus is on sales. You know, you're serving similar people or the similar audience, but there's definitely an opportunity, right, to come together and maybe put on an event or do a podcast swap like what we're doing. But again, you need to get to know the person. And sometimes those opportunities I feel like are very natural, but sometimes you do have to kind of lean in and look and see, is there an opportunity for us to either speak to one another's audiences? Maybe we both have a podcast, but it could be an event. It could be a package that you create for your audience. And so sometimes it's just being willing to slow down, not to get on everyone's podcast, but to maybe pick your top 5 or 10, 5 to 10. I say no more than 10 because that can be a little overwhelming. And really look at those people and see, what are they doing? What are they involved in? And what could we possibly do together?
Mm, I love this because, yes, as you start building that relationship, you start getting to know each other's heart, mission, message, method. There are so many things that come to the surface in ways that can happen. And sometimes it's just referrals directly, but like you said, sometimes there are collaborative
Right?
events or ways to bring people in. And there's something about Kingdom Connections that I feel like we kind of have like maybe like the edge that the world doesn't have. I mean, I know the world is out there telling us you need to network and you need to connect and you need to, build,
Yeah.
keep spreading out. But what is it? What do you think? I'm going to ask you, you're the expert. What do you think it is about Kingdom Connections that really sets us apart as Christian business owners from just the way the rest of the world is connecting and the results of that?
I think it starts with a different mindset
Mm,
that in order to be open to connecting and collaborating, you can't be operating from a place of lack,
yeah.
of scarcity, because if you are, then you're not as willing or open to connect and collaborate with people because you're so focused on getting clients and making money that it's almost like it feels like competition
Mm,
because you compare yourself to someone else and you feel like maybe they do something better and maybe they're going to take a client from me. Like, I don't know. I feel like it is different when you're operating from a place of abundance and you realize that you're a part of a bigger body,
mm,
the body of Christ, that God has called us to operate as one body, many members,
yeah.
because it's just how we are called to serve people. And when you realize that we can serve people better and at a higher level when we're together, and I'm not concerned that you're going to take anybody because I know there's plenty, right? I serve the God who is so abundant, and who has all the clients. And then I also recognize that you bring something that I don't. And that's okay, right? Like you're going to serve the people that you're called to serve, and I'm going to serve the people that God's called me to serve. Um, and so I do think it's about the way that we approach business too, as kingdom people.
Yes, I love that. And I love how you use the one body, many parts, because it's essentially as kingdom business owners, right? Even though we have different businesses, we're all on the same team. We're all
That's
working
right.
towards the same end zone, right? Which is that relationship with Jesus Christ and shining that through our lives and through our businesses. And so therein, is like, this is how and why that I think we as believers are so much more maybe ready and willing, or we should be, to shine
Yeah.
light on others who are also doing kingdom work, because it's not about look at me, it's about look at him, right? And it's not about
Yeah.
accumulating more just for ourselves. And I have this conversation, often here on the podcast is we can do all kinds of great things with our time, but if it's not in light of eternity, is it really even going to matter? There are a lot of good boxes we can check that at the end of
That's
it
right.
all are just going to be boxes. And so that's
Yeah.
where I think that these partnerships have a lot bigger purpose behind them as we're doing that. And I love that you hit on this, right? The God is a God of abundance. And what I always
That's
say
right.
is that with God, our ROI is always abundant because
That's
he does
right.
exceedingly abundantly beyond all we could ask or
Ask him.
imagine,
Yes.
not just because of us, but for his glory. And when you put two people that are kingdom minded in the same room or in the same Zoom or the same podcast, like watch out, because I think you're going to see a lot of multiplication happening out of
Yeah.
kind of a conversation, right? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I love this. I love this. And we've already touched on these things, right? So as we're kind of bringing things back around to time and the ROI on our time, right? What I'm hearing is this guesting is a great way to get an ROI on your time, because you're not just putting it out there, posting and praying that the right people are going to.
Yeah.
You're really targeting where it's going, and then these connections are things that can really lead to a lot more. So, what's a piece of encouragement or kind of a next step that you would give to someone listening who's like, okay, I do feel like I've hit the plateau, or I'm growing and don't want to ever hit a plateau. I just want to take the ceiling off of this thing as I'm going and growing, because this is what God's called me to do. So, what would you say to her listening today so that she can go from where she is to that next place?
Yeah. I would say, first of all, don't just add another thing to your plate, but
Mhm.
really assess where you are and where are your marketing efforts primarily. Are you trying to be everywhere? Do you feel like you're stretched thin? So I would say first assess where you are marketing your business and how is that going? And then I would check in with the Lord
Mm,
about, you know, is there a place that needs to be eliminated? Because again, I don't believe in just adding another thing, but I believe in shifting where we are so that we're not distracted, but we're very intentional and focused about the places that we're showing up. And then from there, it really is, again, going back to, if you know your message, your audience, and your purpose, the next step is, where are the podcasts that I need to be showing up? And so I always recommend you start with where you are and the community that you have. And they they should already know who you are, right? If you're actively engaged. And so then you just you put yourself out there and you remind them, "Hey, this is the message I'm passionate about sharing. I am really wanting to share this message on podcast. Do you have a podcast that you think would be a good fit for my message? Or are you listening to a podcast that
Mm.
you think I could guest on?" And so starting with your own community kind of takes the legwork out of the research because it's like your community has vetted these different podcasts. And so from there, I think you can get a good start for your podcast list and then begin to reach out as just person to person, human to human, no pitch necessarily, but you look at it in terms of how can I serve this audience? So you look at their audience and the message, the mission, and then you look at yourself and you say, how can I fill in the gaps for their audience? How can I serve them? And then you reach out with that genuine outreach. I found your podcast. I love the message and the mission. I listened to this episode. It really resonates with me because this is what I'm passionate about. And I feel like I could really serve your audience this way. And I just want to give a shout out to you, Lisa, because let me just be honest here. I have grabbed your emails sometimes that you've sent me when you've reached out to me to be on my podcast, and I've copied them and I've
Mm.
put them in my files for the outreach ideas because that's how you reach out. And I appreciate that because not everybody does it that way. But you have just literally done that exact thing where you've said, hey, this is what I have and I really think I could add value. And I'm like, she can.
Yeah,
She
right.
absolutely
It's
can.
taking the time to really, like you said, know the host
Yeah.
in the way you can. Sometimes it's someone you already have a connection like we did, but sometimes it's not. I get
Yeah.
so many pitches in my emails, and I can
I
tell
bet you
they
do.
have not listened to my podcast.
Right?
Delete, delete, delete. I don't even respond to the ones that I can tell they're just about what's in it for them. And here's my stuff, and I just want to get in front of more people. But the ones who like they've taken the time to listen, they've directly
Yep.
referenced things. They've said, hey, I know you talk about these topics. Here's how what I talk about can really help to elevate that. Then I
Yeah.
listen. Okay, one of my favorite stories, I pitched someone a couple of months ago, and I did not have any direct connection with her at all. So she did not know me at all. I had been listening to her podcast. I knew we had a lot of similarities and things like that. I was literally sitting on my deck and I had just finished one of her podcasts and I was like, okay, I think I'm supposed to reach out. I didn't overthink it. I didn't script it. I didn't whatever. I literally hit record, created a quick little video with no nice lighting, nothing on my lips, just sitting outside. It was a cloudy day, whatever. And you know what she said to me? She's like, Lissa, I get so many pitches from a lot of really great people, but because you took the time to create a video, I watched
Wow.
and then I heard your heart come through in a way that I can't when somebody just types something. And that's why I said yes. Right. And so it's just, and it didn't, I mean, it took me like 2 minutes. It wasn't like it was like, this huge thing, but it was just sharing my heart and really connecting to that host and to her audience. And that can really go a long way. So,
Yeah. And you just
encouragement.
gave like you want to level up your outreach, create a video.
Yeah.
Like that is the next level. But whether it's a video or it's an email, be genuine. Like
Mm-hmm.
take the time, don't grab the copy paste and just blast it, but just be human to human, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's so good.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't want to steal your spotlight because you're the one who's here on my podcast. So I want you to share with us how do you come in and help business owners in these areas of podcast guesting and making kingdom connections? And then I'll would love to hear how people can connect with you and if you have a resource or something that you can offer so they have a reason to go find you or connect with you after they listen to this.
Yeah, so I really love the beginning of our time together because this is when we get to deep dive into your message, your mission, and you as a person. And so the thing about my business is it's literally been built on prayer from the beginning
Mm.
because God called me to start a business that I didn't even know what a podcast was. And so I just would sit before the Lord and I would just be like, okay, God, like I don't really know what I'm doing here. And so I would just literally pray and I would go on Google and I would research. So I know that God has been building and growing this thing. It's been on prayer. So that's the first thing that we start out with is I pray. I ask God for wisdom and insight and vision for this person that's coming to me. And they want to expand their vision, they want to expand their reach. But ultimately, God knows the vision. And He says, write the vision and make it plain, right?
Mm.
And so I ask God for vision. And a lot of times, what I get to see is that big, like I see them on a stage, I see them speaking to thousands. But then I get to come alongside them and, like, man, I see that you're called to this big thing. And so we get to put together a plan that is specific and strategic for where they are, but is also looking ahead to where God wants to take them,
Mm.
knowing that we're a stop on the journey. And so it's tapping into our own market, like our own podcast platforms that we partner with, and saying, where would they be a good fit to speak? Who do they need to connect with? And then expanding beyond that and looking for those other connections and other people that they could connect with. And we do it in a way that I call it relational pitching.
Mm.
So it's not just a mass pitch, but when I'm looking at the host, I'm really thinking with their heart and their message in mind, like, would they want to connect with them? Is this someone that they could do something with? And so our goal is by the time they meet with the host, they've already been introduced to them. They already feel connected to them because we have reached out again as humans, and we are just saying, hey, I think they could really serve you in this way. So we've already introduced them to the host. And so I feel like we get to be those bridge builders for our clients and between the client and the podcast host, which then again lends itself to those natural collaborations where sometimes the host has become their client.
Mm.
I had one lady recently that she hired the podcast host because she actually needed her services. And so, like, I don't know what God has in store for them, but what I do know is that many times they're saying, man, I don't know where you found this person, but I really feel like it's a divine connection.
Mhm.
And so then I get to be like, Lord, like, you already knew that, right? And so it's really leaning into what are God's plans and what are the doors that He's already prepared for them, and the places and the people.
Yeah.
So I feel like that was a lengthy answer, but I just I love to talk about it, I guess, because I'm always amazed at at the doors that God opens for people when we're just
Mhm.
obedient. And He's like, this is who she needs to connect with.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. You're that connector. You're that door opener. You're that person that's
Yes.
helping them to get to the right places so they can share.
Yeah.
So how can people connect with you? Because I know right now there are people listening who are like, I need a connector like Sabrina. I need someone to help me open some doors. I'm ready to break through this plateau of my reach right now. Yeah, where can people find you and what do you have to offer that can help them get started working with you?
So I would say, first of all, if you do have that clarity around your message, your audience, and your purpose, I do have a resource for you. And it is podcast platforms that I've already curated and put together. They've got the contact information. They are for the Christian woman entrepreneur, whether you're in leadership or ministry. So that's the target audience in this
Okay.
database. So you can grab that resource. I'm going to make sure that you have the link, which I believe that you do. So you can grab that free database, and when you download it, you'll get a series of emails where I literally will walk you through how to utilize the database and how to begin outreaching and what that process looks like. So if that's you, go grab that resource. If you just want to connect and you want to have a chat to see where you are and how we can help you, I would love to connect with you either on Facebook or LinkedIn are the two places that I am at. Sabrina Hammonds. I just prefer just that natural DM me, send me a message, and
I
I would
love
love
that.
to have a conversation.
Yeah, well, that will be time well spent. So I'm going to encourage anyone who's listening right now. You never know what's going to happen from a conversation. I mean, I have had huge shifts. I've had connections. I've had clients, like you said, I've had all kinds of things come from a connection
Yeah.
call with someone. And sometimes it's just us taking that step to open that door. So I definitely recommend we will put the links to both the database and to connecting with Sabrina in those places in the show notes. So you can do that. And Sabrina, I also invite my guests into the Redeem Her Time community where we get to take the conversation off the podcast and actually be able to have a little bit more like, okay, boots on the ground. Here's how can I implement this into my business? And so I'm going to be inviting you as well as our listeners to come into the Redeem Her Time community. If you're already a member, you know where to find us. If not, go to redeemhertime.com/community. And I promise it is not noisy and crowded like a lot of platforms out there where you're members of who knows how many groups, like Sabrina was talking about. This is the place where like you're focused when you come in and on, okay, what is God calling me to, and how am I approaching my time in life and business? And then we go get out there and do the things that we're called to do. So I'm excited for more conversation that can happen inside of there as we do. So thank you so much, Sabrina, for blessing us, encouraging us, challenging us today on the podcast. And I just know that so many women are going to be blessed by the conversation that we've had today. And I know a lot of conversations and connections are going to happen because of the conversation that we've had today. And here's how, things start multiplying. So as we close, I always love to ask my guests this closing question just to get into your heart and calendar. And that is, what is your ROI why? Like, why is it that you as a business owner want to see your impact and your income grow in less time, right? Like what would that do for you and what would that do for the kingdom?
Well, I have such big dreams that God has put on my heart. And I know that part of the dreams is also building the business that will funnel the finances for the big dreams. But then utilizing my time wisely, I feel like I know that God has called me to do the two big things is the homeschooling and the building a business from home. So I'll be just very transparent. When the Lord said to homeschool, I just assumed he meant just that. And when
Mm.
he said it's both and, all I could think of is, Lord, you have the strategy for this, because my first thought is I don't have enough time. I don't have enough
Yeah,
time for
yeah,
this.
yeah.
And so as
And here
I've
you
been
are
building,
2 years in.
yeah. And so the Lord continues to remind me it's not about the the not having enough time. You have more than enough time.
Mm.
But it's like what you talk about. There's got to be a heart shift. There's all kinds of shifts that we need to make because we do have enough time.
Mm.
So I feel like it's so that I can do the things that God has called me to do,
Mm.
um, and be present in all of those areas.
I love that. Right. And that's what it's about, is really being present in the context
Yeah,
of life and business that he's called us to
yeah,
for his glory, right? As we're working towards that one day. That's how we live today. So thank you so much
yeah,
for sharing with us. Thank you for helping us to think about where we're focusing our time in our business to get our message out. And I'm excited to see the fruit that's going to come from this conversation. So we'll see you guys
yeah.
all over inside the Redeem Her Time community. Take care.